Hey, ghoul friends, it's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of spooky stories centered on paranormal folklore from Latin American and Hispanic cultures. Right off the bat, a happy belated Feliz Dia de las Madres and Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there who happen to listen to Susto. I hope everybody had a good weekend. Jeff and I made a quick trip home to go see our moms. I also went to a Mixlan Festival in McAllen, Texas, which is this amazing, big art, culture, and music festival. And I'll probably be sharing some clips of that. I know I posted them on my story on Instagram. That's at Susto Podcast on every platform. But I think I also will post like maybe a mini vlog or something of that on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Susto Podcast, where you can also, if you are a best ghoul friend, watch today's episode. Say hi to our little ghoul friend pillow back here. We need a name for our little ghoul friend right here, because they're in every episode now, every video episode. And so we need a name for them. So if you can think of one, let me know. Send it in. Some quick updates about the show, some things that are coming up. I want to give a big, huge thank you to Alexis and Eric from City Alchemist for the last episode. As I mentioned, it was years in the making, literally constantly saying, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. And they were so patient and so kind because, as I mentioned before, it was always the ball was in my court. It's my show, right? So it needs to be up to me to get it together, get my life together and make it happen. So we finally did, and they allowed us in their space. And it was, I think, a great episode. I honestly, when I was editing it, I found myself kind of just zoning out and listening and not really kind of paying attention to, do I need to edit that? Because I was so into it. So if you haven't heard it, if you haven't listened to it, please make sure you go and do so and follow them online. Also, huge shout out to one of my dear ghoul friends, Dan Segovia. We've worked together before, but thank you, Dan, so much for doing the video for this episode. It looks so beautiful. You may have seen some of the clips on social media. I've been posting those. And again, the full video episode is available exclusively on Patreon. Thank you again, Dan, so much. And speaking of City Alchemist, this Friday, May 16th at 8 p.m., we are going to be doing a night with Susto at City Alchemist. They are having me over to do a live storytelling, and after we are screening the movie Veronica. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, it is the Vallecas case based on Estefania Gutierrez Lázaro, and then the movie Veronica is based on that story. So it's going to be a fun night. There will be refreshments available. Seating is limited, so you can RSVP at the link tree. That's linktr.ee/Susto, and it should be maybe the first link up there. The tickets are donation based. Mainly it's there so you can reserve a space because, again, limited seats. So feel free to give as much as you want, as little as you want. We will just be excited to have everybody there for a fun, spooky night. Again, that is May 16th, this Friday. So if you're listening to this on Patreon in a couple days, if you're listening to this everywhere else, tomorrow here in Austin at City Alchemist, you can follow either of our profiles. That's at City Alchemist or at Susto Podcast. Visit the link in the link tree to learn more about that. And then on Saturday, May 17th, you can catch me at the 4th annual Psychic and Spirit Fest, hosted by the Curious Twins at Victoria's Black Swan Inn in San Antonio. So a couple details about that. The gates will open on Saturday at 3, speakers will start at 4, and I will be speaking at 5. So make sure to come by and listen to and watch the incredible lineup. Say hi, say boo to me. Don't boo me while I'm up there, but give me a little boo afterwards. I don't know. And then they also have some really cool stuff. So it's going to be a full market along with the speakers. If you haven't been before, I love this event. I love the events that they do at Victoria's Black Swan Inn because there's food, there's drinks, it's just always a really cool time. So make sure you go check that out. They will also have the Annabelle doll. Yes, the doll from the Warren's Occult Museum and other haunted objects along with her. So make sure that you go check out the ticket options so you can see what you can get access to. I know some things are sold out. You may want to check it out, see what's still available. I think only tickets at the gate will be available, so you'll want to try and get there early. But as always, feel free to reach out to Curious Twins. You can follow them online. That link is also on my link tree. Again, that's linktr.ee/Susto, and it should be the second one right after A Night with Susto at City Alchemist. So I will see you this weekend. So much fun to be had. And without any further ado, let's get into today's story, which is the story of El Puente de Suspiros.
Hey, what's up? I'm Charlie.
And I'm Tyler.
And we are Believing the Bizarre,
a paranormal podcast that dives into the unknown and the unusual every Tuesday.
We discuss hauntings, cryptids, aliens, UFO encounters, conspiracies, and more.
And we break down whether or not we find them believable.
All right, listen, if you're not paying for electricity, you're not paying for dinner.
Saw a terrifying looking face pressed to the window with gaping eyes.
Almost reached it when the laughter stopped suddenly, and a sound behind me made me turn around.
Sorry, I was gonna do it, but then I had SpaceX.
So we got you covered, whether you like horror or laughs, or both. We actually really hope it's both.
With over 3 million downloads, you'll be joining a bizarro community that we promise is more than just Mothman and our parents.
We even take creepy stories from our listeners and turn them into episodes.
Check out Believing the Bizarre on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Believing the Bizarre, a podcast as bizarre as you are.
In the quiet town of Comala, nestled in the lush, green valleys of the Mexican state of Colima, there's a bridge that no one dares cross at night. Crossing the San Juan River, the bridge connected the Calle Progreso to the other side of the bank. It was originally intended for the centennial celebration of independence. The bridge, however, is marked with fear and anger. Now known as the Puente de Suspiros, or the Bridge of Sighs, it stands as a foreboding edifice. Its ancient stone arches are covered in moss and ivy, casting eerie shadows over the dark waters below. The bridge is more than just an old stone structure. It's a place of whispers, secrets, and restless souls. Legend has it that on moonless nights the bridge comes alive with the sighs of children, soft, sorrowful exhalations that seem to rise from the very stones themselves. The air around the bridge grows heavy, and a chilling silence envelops the area, broken only by the faint, ghostly whispers that send shivers down the spine of anyone who dares to listen. The townspeople of Comala speak of the bridge in hushed tones, sharing tales of its haunted past and the souls trapped within its cold, unforgiving stone. The bridge was built in 1909, at the height of the Porfiriato, when Comala was growing rapidly and the town needed the bridge to connect its farthest corners. The workers who arrived to build the bridge were outsiders, sent from the city by Porfirio Díaz's authoritarian government. They were strangers to the rural town of Comala, and their presence immediately stirred tension and mistrust. The townspeople, wary of the government and its heavy-handed tactics, were suspicious of the workers. They knew that children could be put to work under such regimes, and the fear of losing their own children to forced labor loomed over them. The workers, on the other hand, distrusted the townspeople, viewing them as simple and untrustworthy. This mutual suspicion created an atmosphere of disquietude from the very beginning of the construction. The workers were under immense pressure from the government to finish the bridge quickly. They often had to work late into the evening, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of lanterns. Exhausted and overworked, they became irritable and short-tempered. Their anger sometimes spilled over, and they would snap at the curious townspeople who ventured too close, further deepening the divide between the two groups. Miguel, however, was blissfully unaware of the underlying tensions. As a young boy, he was lucky enough to not understand why the townspeople were uneasy. He was just excited to see a bridge being built. The sight of the workers and the construction process fascinated him. He would watch from a distance, his eyes wide with wonder, imagining the grand structure that would soon span the river. His parents, aware of the dangers, told him to stay away. They warned him that it was dangerous to go near the site and that kids had gone missing around construction areas. Despite their warnings, Miguel continued to watch from afar, his naive and trusting nature making him believe that nothing bad could happen. Late one afternoon, Miguel's excitement turned to fear when he saw something that chilled him to the bone. The workers were mixing blood into the mortar. He couldn't believe his eyes, but the sight was unmistakable. The red liquid blended with the cement, creating a gruesome mixture. Horrified, Miguel ran back to town and told everyone what he had seen. At first, the townspeople were skeptical, but the existing tension and mistrust made them more susceptible to believing Miguel's story. Whispers spread quickly through the town, each retelling more dramatic than the last. The idea of blood being mixed into the mortar was horrifying enough, but soon, the story took on a life of its own. "Did you hear? They're using blood in the construction," one villager would say. "Blood? Whose blood?" another would ask, eyes wide with fear. "I heard it's the blood of children," someone would whisper, their voice trembling. Children who went missing near the construction site. The townspeople imaginations ran wild. They remembered the warnings about children going missing and began to connect the dots in the most terrifying way possible. The fear of losing their own children to forced labor turned into a belief that the workers were using the blood of kidnapped children to build the bridge. The whispers and rumors fed off each other, growing more hysterical with each passing day. Soon, strange sounds began to emanate from the bridge. At first, only a few townspeople heard the sighs, low voices murmuring words no one could quite understand. They dismissed it as their imagination or the wind playing tricks on them. When they asked others, they were met with confusion and denial. "I heard no such thing," the others would say, shaking their heads. But as the days passed, more and more people began to hear the eerie sounds. The whispers grew louder, and the sighs became more frequent, spreading fear throughout the town. The whispers and sighs fueled the townspeople's fears, leading them to believe that children were being used in the construction of the bridge. The community fell into hysteria, convinced that the bridge was cursed and that the souls of the lost children were trapped within its stone and mortar. Miguel, despite his initial horror, began to doubt what he had seen. Could it really have been blood? Or was it just a trick of the light, his imagination running wild? Determined to find out the truth, he decided to venture to the bridge alone one evening. Known for his adventurous spirit, he had heard the rumors, the warnings of children who had gone missing near the construction site, but he wasn't afraid. Surely it was just superstition, he thought. As he approached the bridge, Miguel tried to act brave. He told himself that there was nothing to fear, that the stories were just tales spun by frightened villagers. His steps were confident at first, his head held high, but as he drew closer, the night seemed to grow darker and the air heavier. The silence around him felt oppressive, and his bravado began to waver. He stood at the edge of the bridge, listening. The air settled around him. That's when he heard it. A soft, agonizing sigh that echoed through the night. It wasn't the wind, not this time. It sounded like a person, like someone who had been waiting for a long time to be heard. Miguel's heart started to pound. He tried to convince himself it was nothing, just the wind or his imagination, but the sound was too real, too close. His palms grew sweaty and he felt a chill run down his spine. He turned to leave, but another sigh came, closer this time, as though the wind was moving through the stone itself. It was followed by something worse, a whisper, low and distant, almost like a voice calling his name. Miguel's heart began to race as he looked around, but there was no one there, only the cold, dark emptiness of the night. Then he heard it again. This time it was clearer, but no less terrifying. a child's voice, soft and distant, pleading, "Help, help me." Miguel stood frozen, every instinct telling him to run, but his feet felt rooted to the ground. "Help me." The whispers grew louder, and the sighs came faster, as if they were closing in on him. He could hear a multitude of voices now, all of them overlapping. Some were desperate, others full of sorrow, but they all seemed to be coming from the bridge itself, from the stone and mortar, as if the bridge were alive, breathing with the pain of those it had claimed. A cold wind swept through, carrying with it the sound of shuffling footsteps, faint but unmistakable. Miguel's breath caught in his throat, and his hands trembled as he turned to run. But before he could take a single step, the whispers rose to a frantic pitch, and for a moment, everything fell silent. It was then that Miguel heard a final, terrible sound, the sharp crack of a twig snapping behind him. He spun around, but there was no one there, just the bridge, standing still, as if waiting for him to come closer. Suddenly, a construction worker emerged from the shadows, yelling at Miguel. The worker's face was twisted in anger, his eyes wild and bloodshot. His hands, covered in blood from working late and mixing the mortar, glistened ominously in the moonlight. The blood dripped slowly from his fingers, staining the ground beneath him. The sight of the blood combined with the worker's furious shouts terrified Miguel. Miguel bolted, his heart pounding in his chest, but the whispers followed him, echoing in his ears as he ran back to town. The townspeople heard Miguel's screams and rushed to the bridge. They found the worker with blood on his hands and assumed he was trying to hurt Miguel. In their panic, they became a crazed mob, their fear turning into anger. "He's trying to hurt Miguel," someone shouted, their voice filled with terror. "Look at his hands, they're covered in blood," another yelled, pointing at the worker's stained fingers. "That's proof, he's guilty." The mob's fear turned into fury. They yelled and threatened the worker with violence, brandishing sticks and stones. "Get out of our town," one man shouted, his face contorted with rage. The worker tried to explain, but his words were drowned out by the angry shouts of the mob. They advanced on him, their eyes wild with fear and anger. The worker, realizing he was now in danger, backed away, his hands raised in a futile attempt to placate them. He had no choice but to flee. He ran, the mob chasing him to the edge of the village, their shouts echoing in the night. The townspeople, driven by their hysteria and fear, watched as the worker disappeared into the darkness, never to return. The construction of the bridge continued, but the tension remained. The townspeople never knew if the other construction workers were also using blood, but they all kept their children far away from the construction site. The bridge was eventually finished, standing tall and imposing over the river, yet the townspeople were always afraid of it, convinced that they could hear the sighs of tormented children coming from its stone arches. To this day, the Puente de Suspiros is shrouded in fear and mystery. The whispers and sighs continue to haunt the nights, and the townspeople of Comala speak of the bridge in hushed tones, sharing tales of its haunted past and the souls trapped within its cold, unyielding stone. Welcome back, Wolf friends. Okay, so to get right into it, we have a few sources here, of course, and this episode was once again written, researched, and co-written by Jeffrey Doyle and myself, so Big love, Jeffrey Doyle. There are a few sources here, but Jeff also left a note for us. This says, interesting background information. They would actually add animal blood to mortar to make it stronger. The proteins helped bind the mortar together. And a quick definition of mortar is it's a workable paste which hardens to bind building blocks such as stones, bricks, and concrete masonry units to fill and seal the irregular gaps between them, spread the weight of them evenly, and sometimes to add decorative colors to patterns to masonry walls. So if you've ever seen a brick house, it is the gray stuff between the bricks. It's what kind of holds and binds everything together. But there's a link here as well. This is from Sage Journals. It's journals.sagepub.com. And once again, all the direct links to these sources will be in the Susto Google Doc on Patreon. And this is from an article. It looks like it's titled Preparation and Characterization of Ancient Like Masonry Mortars. And in the abstract, this says the characterization of mortars prepared according to ancient methods from the colonial period in Mexico is reported. The materials were prepared by mixing limestone, sand, water, and an additive, bovine blood, milk, or cactus sap. So one of those three, the bovine blood, milk, or cactus sap. And the compression strength, flexural strength, and tensile strength were measured according to ASTM standards and at different aging stages. The technology developed allows, on the one hand, counting with a reliable methodology for restoring ancient buildings similar to the originally employed, and on the other, to offer a low-cost technique for construction by using agricultural products. A lot of this sounds really technical and sciencey, and I read through it, and every time I could find the word blood, of course, I zeroed in on that. But essentially, it just kept saying how it was prepared. So, like, the recipes, again, include bovine blood, milk, cactus sap. In this particular study, mortars were meant for restoring buildings from the, XVI? What number is that? I don't know. Century in the Mexican city of Morelia, state of Michoacan, classified officially by UNESCO in World List of Cultural Heritage in the early 1990s. Yeah, it's just saying that these buildings, that was kind of the recipe to what made this mortar stronger. And towards the end of this article, it says, for the case of mortars with bovine blood, in spite of their relatively mild mechanical behavior, the reactivity to the environment was surprisingly good. In any case, all the additives helped to improve the mechanical properties of the mortars as compared to a simple limestone mortar. This is important because the Mexican standards for historical monuments prohibit the use of Portland cement for restoration works, leading to the search of alternative methods for preparing inexpensive mortars. So I don't believe that this is a practice that is still in play, but it's interesting. Blood was used to build certain things. So with this story, we're going to dive into the origins. You can imagine that people may have seen blood being used, and then you know how these stories go. Also, if you are watching the video, where is she? Margaret has been harassing me because I'm home alone right now, and so there's no one to distract her, and she is just, I'm trying to keep her from screaming, and let me see if I can get her up here on camera. And watch, she's gonna be pissed that I'm lifting her up to the camera. Say hi. She's purring. Can you hear her? Margaret. She looks so funny in the camera. All right. You're nasty. Hopefully she will stay quiet for the duration of this episode. But if you're watching video and you keep seeing me like move my arm down, I'm petting her so she doesn't scream her head off. Okay, let's dive into these next sources after that Margaret cameo. This first source here is from MexicoUnexplained.com, Legends from the State of Colima. And this is, as you guessed, it is a list of legends from the state of Colima. At number 3 here, I think in no particular order, it's called the Bridge of Moans, again, El Puente de Suspiros. And this says, in the town of Comala, in the years 1909 and 1910, workers built a bridge over the San Juan River. They called the new road leading to the bridge Calle Progreso in honor of the 100th anniversary of the Mexican War of Independence. So this bridge is also like a monument, right? It continues, the construction of the bridge was the most exciting thing the town had seen in years. Many townsfolk went to the construction site to observe the bridge being built, and the workers soon became concerned that a curious child might suffer an accident, right? Construction place is no place for a child, construction site. So the parents in the town began cautioning their children to stay away. When strong warnings were not enough, some parents began circulating rumors that the bridge builders were taking children and mixing them in with the building materials to make the bridge. We're going to see a different version of how they were mixed in another source, but just prefacing that. That kept away most of the little ones, except for one young boy who ventured to the site and from behind a low wall watched some of the workers mixing cement. Again, as you imagine, this boy is who inspired our main character for this story, Miguel. It was an old local tradition to blend a little bit of chicken's blood in with the mixture for good luck. We're going to talk more about this, the good luck idea and chicken's blood, versus what we know is actually documented is they would use bovine blood, but because it strengthened the mortar. But this is an interesting thing I wanted to look in and bring up. So we'll go into that next. But so this continues. And when the little boy watching the cement mixing saw a little bit of red liquid added to the mixture, he assumed it was the blood of a child. He ran back to his neighborhood and told his friends. Soon, most of the town of Comala believed that some of the local kids who had gone missing ended up in the bridge as part of the finished product. There are lines of writing on the bridge, a few sentences to dedicate it, and people in town who could not read assumed for many years that the letters spelled out the children who were sacrificed to give the town a span across the Rio San Juan. So strong was the belief in the story of the dead children that the bridge was nicknamed the Bridge of Moans, or El Puente de Suspiros, because passersby swore they heard the tormented cries of the kids who were mixed in with the mortar. Okay, couple things to go through that we pointed out in this story, and this is a really good kind of version of the story that has like every point that we want to hit, right? The first thing I think that we said we wanted to talk about was, so I'm going to work in reverse here. So this idea of the dedication and people not being able to read. So yeah, it was just saying, I'm assuming it's like a plaque that says on this day or this bridge was built for, like, why is this bridge here, right? And we know it's because it's a dedication to the 100th anniversary of Mexican War of Independence. So I'm sure it says something about that. But there's people who weren't able to read and they had already heard this story by then. So they were thinking, oh my God, they put the names of the kids who are in this bridge or who were used to build this bridge. Freaky, right? And so that kind of just perpetuated the story. The thing about the blood that I was really excited about, I have that a little bit lower in the document here because we're going to jump around. This is venturing into an area of the world that we haven't done before, but I've been very curious about doing it. I've been asked to do it, but I'm not sure. So consider this a poll. Yes or no, tell me what you all think. Leave it in the comment of the social post for this. Send me a message, an email, leave a comment on Spotify, especially if you are of Filipino descent or you are Filipino. Please let me know what you think. I have been asked about doing stories from the Philippines, and I've told people before, I've kind of joked about it like different land, same colonizer. So I'm wondering if that covers that area of like Hispanic. I don't know exactly too much, but if I'm encouraged to do so, I would love to do more research and to like educate myself properly about the culture as well, because I know that there are amazing stories that come from there. So I say all that to say, because this next link, it's from the Philippines, and it says cordilleracowboy.home.blog, Philippine Life and Travels, and this entry was published in 2019. It's called Folkways, Chicken Blood and Little People. That's exactly what it's called. I'm not sure what the involvement was about little people. I didn't read the entire thing, but it spoke to the chicken blood thing, which I was really interested in because it was mentioned, of course, in that source earlier. And I've heard things about this. So I'm just going to read this. It's in quotes. This says, they need 2 chickens. Who? The workers. They need 2 chickens before they can start the fence. Why? They need to put blood in the first post hole or the fence will fall. This continues. We had hired a dozen or so local fellows to clear out our overgrown pastures and build our perimeter fence. They had made great progress clearing the tall grass and underbrush while waiting for the posts and wire. The request for the chickens came when the first posts arrived. I wasn't really surprised by the request. I've had a lifelong interest in folkways and worked for several years as a historian. Many cultures the world over have a tradition of a sacrifice of some sort in the foundations or walls of various structures. This is an aside. If you are sensitive to the treatment of animals, just forewarn you might want to skip maybe like 15 seconds. This says, in Old England, workers would sometimes seal a hopefully already dead cat into the walls of a new building, so a request for fresh chicken blood didn't really surprise me. I drove to a town and bought a couple of live chickens from a street vendor. You might want to skip this whole source if you're sensitive to this sort of thing, just a heads up, but it's not extremely graphically detailed, but still either way. This continues, one of the workers took them down to the creek where he promptly butchered them, draining the blood into a bowl. Another fellow carried the bowl up to the fencing crew. They poured the offering into the waiting post hole without any ceremony that I could discern. Back at the creek, I noticed that the chickens had been plucked, cut up, and placed into the cook pot. The divide between the physical and the spirit world seems thin here in the rural Philippines. Nearly everyone appears to have had some type of experience with an otherworldly being. And then this continues about, I think, other stories there. But this idea of the blood being used. So I poked around about that, and by the blood being used for superstitious or religious practices. So there's, of course, I think many of us know or have heard about the idea of like animal sacrifices, especially with chickens. And the reason I found this so interesting is because I heard recently, I'm not going to say who or where, but I heard that there was a really big event being put on for the public, and that before they put up like flags or like posts or stuff, like basically essentially like this, like something that's going in the ground that like as an offering for any deities that may be in control of or could impact the weather. It was an offering to them. So that they put either, I can't remember exactly, I would have to ask, but that they put either just the blood or like a whole chicken at the bottom of the post hole before they put the flag or the fence post, whatever it was, as an offering to like have good weather, for this thing to go off well, for, for like, just like it was an offering, right? For, as you could say, I guess, good luck, as was mentioned earlier. So I just thought this was extremely interesting, and it really piqued my interest, and I had to like dig around a little bit more about that before I moved on. I'm going to move on to the other sources, and we're going to reference back the things that I was kind of thinking about earlier. The idea of kids being used for manual labor, for like forced manual labor, that's not like a fake thing. It was something that was actually happening. This is another academic journal. This one was behind like a login wall. I had to log into something, but this is from Gale Books, and the first part of the link says go-gale.com.easyproxy.lib. But if you want to look this up, it is from a book called The World of Child Labor, a Historical and Regional Survey. The article, I'm assuming the article in this that we're going to look over, or that I looked over, is titled History of Child Labor in Mexico. And this was published in 2009, authored by Marcos T. Aguila and Mariano E. Torres B. Yes, if you want to look this up, it's got some length to it, and it's really academic, but I read the entire thing, and it's talking about the history of child labor in Mexico, and how, especially, again, as was mentioned in the story, in the, I have trouble saying the word, but like the Porfiriato, but during Porfirio Díaz's regime, or his time over Mexico in power, and even before that in Mexico, and especially in ancient times, that younger people, or that children were working. They were part of the working class, children as young as like 12. And it wasn't always, as you imagine, like labor, going out to work with like a briefcase or whatever, right? Obviously not. It was also part of the familial structures, which I think we still kind of see now. Eldest daughters of the family, you all are really gonna hear this one, and it's gonna hit you in the heart. But there was a name for the eldest daughters in the families that would take care of their children, and that was considered labor, because it is labor. And so this whole thing, it's really interesting. It's talking about the different kinds of labor that children were basically used for, and it ranged again from household labor to working in the mines to working as apprentices. But there's also a breakdown based on like class, and caste is the word that was also used, that depending on who you were and what your background was, you could be an apprentice, but you could not then become the thing that you were apprenticing for. You were just an assistant. And then if you worked in the mines, depending again on your background, on your indigeneity, on your how much money your family already had, on how much land you did or didn't have, that the pay scale was based off of that, and not on the work that you were doing, the quality of work, the amount that you produced. It was based on who you were, which is wild to me. And let's be real, still applies to women in the world, right? But this is just a really interesting look. And again, it talks a lot about child labor, and then how eventually it was abolished, and also in some ways how that kind of continues. There was something really interesting here towards the end. This says, thus toward the end of the year 2000, this is at the very end of this that I thought was interesting. It says, thus toward the end of the year 2000, the percentage of working children in households with less than 5 person was 14.3, and in households of 7 and 8 members, it reached a surprising 21.4%. The ancient regime appears to have been resuscitated. So this is saying that this idea or this practice of child labor, and you have to really expand what your idea of labor is, because labor happens in the household, like stay-at-home moms. It's not just a cute name for someone who takes care of the family or children or runs the household. It's a job. It's a full-time job. Absolutely. It is labor. And that's like a whole can of worms that we can unpack and have hours-long discussions about. But so ultimately, I thought this article is really cool because I think it could challenge someone to expand what their idea is on what labor is. And then again, it's saying that this kind of thing is happening again. And it's really honestly sad to see it sometimes. You think about cases with children, how they're, I think the term is called parentified, is when that happens. Is when they are the children, but then they're forced to either care for siblings or, depending on the situation, care for their parent for a variety of reasons. But I don't know, it was just like, I thought it was really important to look at this also, and this idea of child labor and the history of child labor in Mexico, and how, again, it varied across the board from different types of labor and how they were treated and why they were treated that way. So I could maybe do something separate about this. Again, it deserves its own episode, or maybe I can find something really cool, another podcast about it. But if you are interested, again, this article, it's titled History of Child Labor in Mexico. The book is The World of Child Labor and Historical and Regional Survey. Authors Marcos T. Aguila and Mariano E. Torres B. And also, anytime you all hear me talk about like an academic source in Susto, on Susto, you could also, if it's behind some sort of paywall, or you need some sort of like official login for something that you can't get or you can't afford, or you just don't want to pay for it, I have heard that a lot of times if you just reach out to an author, especially an academic author, and you say, hey, I heard about this thing you wrote, I was really interested in it, unfortunately can't get behind login, paywall, whatever it is there any other way to access it? Sometimes they will just send you their research for free. They're like, yeah, here's a link, here's an email, here's a document, because, you know, I feel like I'm going to use the word good, any good academic would want to share that information freely. But because of how it's published, the publishers then have to put, I don't know, whatever. I'm just saying, sometimes you just have to ask. What did we say in the City Alchemist episode? You just got to ask sometimes. Okay, so the next source that we have here is from mas-mexico.com.mx. And to be honest, this is just another retelling of the story, but I want to say this is where they talk about the pillars. Okay, yeah, so this says, however, since it was dangerous for children to be in a construction area unattended, the adults devised a way to scare them away without resorting to scolding or reprimanding them. They told the children that the bridge builders often used curious children and stuck them between the columns. So I believe this source was translated. So what I'm imagining is they were telling them they're going to put you, like literally they're going to just put you in the bridge. So imagine like surrounded in like a pillar that's holding up part of the bridge. Like they're going to put you in there if you get too close. So like a different way that this, honestly, threat was made to the kid, which is what a lot of these stories are. They're threats, right? Paranormal threats. And they were told if you get too close, they're going to put you in there. And then now we know that other versions say they're going to use your blood. They're going to put you in there. You're going to be part of the bridge. So whether that is your complete like physical being, or if they're taking your blood and using that in the mortar mixture. But I just thought I wanted to bring that part of that variation of the story. This next source that we have here is from paratodomexico.com, and this is Legend of the Bridge of Sighs. Again, this is pretty much the same short kind of legend. The year is 1909, 1910. The bridge was built in Comala over the San Juan River. Okay, and this is, again, why we wanted to point this one out. This says, faced with this situation, the parents, wanting to avoid an accident, decided to warn their children that the workers were taking children and, while still alive, embedding them in walls and columns. So it was, again, the threat went different ways. They got creative with it. They're going to kill you and put you in there. They're going to drain your blood and mix it in there in the cement, or they're going to basically not bury, instead of bury, they're going to seal you alive into the wall and the columns of this thing. This also says, this led to the fact that once the work was completed and inaugurated, many single women refrained from passing through there, as they claimed to hear the cries and sighs of the buried children, mistaking them for their own mothers who had abandoned them. Adults who lacked the gift of reading pointed to the inscription located on one of the columns relating to information. This is also translated, so I don't know, but basically people who couldn't read, they would look at the inscription or the dedication on it, relating the information about its inauguration, stating that the names of the children buried, there were those names there. So again, that's where this comes from. And I believe the last source that we have here, this is from Diario del Yaqui.mx, and this says, learn about the legend of the Bridge of Sighs, one of the most famous and interesting in Colima. Again, this is a translated source, so that's probably going to be different when you first find it online. Again, talks about what the story is. This also has the detail of, they said the caretakers often lured curious children between the columns so that they were built into it. Towards the end of this, it says, is the legend real? It says, it has been reported that the young man did indeed see blood on the pillars, but this fluid was from animals, as it is said that back then, blood contributed to the consistency of the mixture, making it harder or stronger. The legend originated from a simple misunderstanding, although it was thanks to this that the Bridge of Sighs became an iconic place in Colima. Again, I want to say another part said that at the same time that this bridge is being built, that children were actually like going missing. I think this was also towards the end of when child labor was being used. So just that those different things mixed into each other, like they're taking children, maybe they're using them for child labor. What is the kind of work that they're being used for? Maybe the work is like their body or their blood being used to make these buildings stronger, to make this bridge stronger. So again, people hear these different stories, these different details, then they make up stories, they run with them, and then before you know it, here we are talking about El Puente de Suspiros. Welcome back, Ghoul friends. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Or if you are a best Ghoul friend on Patreon, you have access to the video version to this and many other episodes. Again, the videos is something I'm trying to keep up. If you're enjoying it, let me know. Shout me out on Patreon. And if you are enjoying the show, if you would like to support in other ways, you already know the easiest way to do so is by liking, subscribing, rating, reviewing, interacting with the show wherever you are listening, encouraging your Ghoul friends to listen to the show and to do the same. You can follow me for any and all updates on Susto. That is at Susto Podcast on every platform on social media. You can also visit sustopodcast.com. And if you would like to hear your own scary story on a Letters from the Beyond episode, you can do so by visiting the link in my link tree. That's linktr.ee/Susto, or by visiting again my website and hitting that Tell Me a Story button. You can send in also with your story, or instead of a video, a photo, audio recording, any multimedia you may have that you think I should share on the show or on social media, send it to me that way. And if you would like to support the show with money dollars, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Susto Podcast and check out the tiers, see if any of those work for you. As always, I am grateful for any and all kinds of support. And a special shout out to this episode's patrons. You are Liza, Sadie, Rachel, Alejandra, Luther, April, D, Josette, Sam, Mandy, Jules, Lori, Jeannie, Monica, Desiree C, Ashes, Neressa, Rachel, Azucena, Marlene, Chata, Lainey, Desiree A, Carla, Archer, Ricardo, Vanessa, Maritza, Nieves, Manermal, Iris, Mar, Flor, and Selena. Thank you all so much. Your support means everything to me. Once more, you can catch me tomorrow, Friday, May 16th at City Alchemist for a live storytelling and movie screening of Veronica, and then on Saturday, May 17th at the Curious Twins 4th Annual Psychic and Spirit Fest at Victoria's Black Swan Inn. I will see you all this weekend. Thank you for listening, and until next time, no te asustes. Bye.